Credential stuffing affects J.Crew and Tesco customers. T-Mobile discloses a data breach. MCOR works to recover from a ransomware infestation. Coronavirus-themed emails remain common phishbait. It's an international problem. U.S. authorities are pleased with how election security on Super Tuesday went, but some local governments are recovering from self-inflicted tech wounds. And there's more on official U.S. suspicion of Huawei.
And now, a word from our sponsor, ExtraHop, securing modern business with network detection and response. Cloud native is a buzzword, but it's also a direction. IDC predicts that 70% of enterprise applications will be developed cloud native by 2021. It's time for security teams to adopt the same agility and speed as their DevOps counterparts, so they can secure multi-cloud deployments and enterprise IoT at scale. ExtraHop helps organizations like Home Depot and Wizards of the Coast detect threats inside their hybrid and cloud environments, up to 95% faster and respond 60% more efficiently. Investigate an attack with ExtraHop in the full product demo of cloud-native network detection and response, available online at extrahop.com/cyber. That's extrahop.com/cyber. And we thank ExtraHop for sponsoring our show. Funding for this CyberWire podcast is made possible in part by McAfee, security built natively in the cloud for the cloud, to protect the latest like containers, to empower your changemakers like developers, and to enable business accelerators like your teams. Cloud security that accelerates business. It's about time. Go to McAfee.com/time.
From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Elliot Peltzman filling in for Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, March 5th, 2020. Today's news includes several disclosures of data breaches and ransomware attacks. First, clothing retailer J.Crew has warned affected customers that it sustained a data breach in April of 2019. The store has disabled an unknown number of accounts that were exposed in the attack. It's asked the affected customers to contact customer care to restore those accounts. Bleeping Computers says the incident was a credential stuffing attack. In credential stuffing attacks, the bad actors use big collections of username and password combinations, which they try against targeted accounts. Sometimes they get hits. The tactic works because people tend to use the same usernames and passwords across multiple accounts. If one account is compromised, the credentials can be tried elsewhere. There's a thriving underworld market for stolen credentials, and credential stuffing is a big reason why that particular crime pays. In addition to writing affected customers, J.Crew has also notified California's Attorney General. TechCrunch wonders why it took J.Crew almost a year to disclose the breach. A spokesman told the news outlet that routine web scanning detected improper access, and customers were, quote, promptly notified, end quote. There's some vagueness there. It's not clear, for example, when the scanning took place or when the anomalies were detected. Credential stuffing has also bothered consumers in the UK. The big British supermarket chain Tesco has responded to a credential stuffing campaign against shoppers who use its loyalty cards by reissuing some 600,000 new cards to its customers. Tesco told the BBC that its own systems had not been breached, but that customer loyalty accounts had been. Back in the U.S., Connecticut-headquartered industrial conglomerate MCOR has disclosed that it sustained a ransomware attack. The specific strain involved is Ryuk. MCOR says it's investigating, but that operations continue and there appears to have been no data breach. And mobile carrier T-Mobile has warned customers that an attack on its email provider resulted in the compromise of a relatively small number of employee email accounts. This is of concern to customers because some of the employee emails that could have been accessed by the attackers contained customer information. That information might have included, T-Mobile said, quote, customer names and addresses, phone numbers, account numbers, rate plans and features, and billing information, end quote. Credit card and social security numbers were not, the company added, at risk. They've closed the breach and are working with federal law enforcement to investigate. Historically, CISOs have turned to the government and said, "Defend us from other countries that want to wage war on a country." But how do you defend against a country that wants to wage war against a business? Joining us is Bill Harmer, CISO at SecureAuth, who spoke with Dave about the new challenges CISOs face, helping businesses stay ahead of these threats.
The world of bringing systems, people, companies online into a digital environment that has no gates, no controls, has a pathway from anywhere to anywhere in milliseconds. And if you think sort of historically or even currently, an ICBM takes 30 to 35 minutes to make it from Russia to the US. Right now, you can launch a DDoS attack in milliseconds. And now with encrypted technology, so with everything going to SSL, you have nice private communications between some endpoint somewhere and the target you're after. Today, with the attacks that we see, Equifax, Marriott, OPM, Anthem, none of that data showed up on the dark web for sale. And that's because, somebody, nation state, and I think it was just yesterday that they just charged the PLA with the Equifax hack. They're looking for massive amounts of data. They need as much data as they can because then they can quite comfortably, sitting in a secure facility somewhere in China or Russia or wherever it is, start running analysis on who would be a good attack or a good target, who would be a good victim, who could they turn. And it doesn't have to be that typical one where you're looking for the one person that has access to everything. You can now look for somebody who has access to someone who has access to someone who has access, and it's sort of going down the line. So it's a really, really messy place that we're sitting in right now.
I've heard folks say that imagine had the Sony breach been a physical breach, had a nation state broken in, rifled through the file cabinets and taken things back to their country. We'd be talking about a different situation in terms of how we would describe that or label that. Could be considered not just espionage, perhaps an act of war. How do we contend with that? How do we contend with that difference? That in the end, it seems to me like the results are the same. The bad guys have your information. They have your data. What's the responsibility of our nation to help protect us against these things?
That is a really good question because it extends, I think, farther than just stealing information. A DDoS attack takes people out, takes systems out, causes economic disruption. Well, the U.S. always had isolation, right? Friends to the north, friends to the south. And historically, if you looked at something like Britain had the RAF, they had the anti-aircraft guns, they had boats in the water patrolling the shores, and that's how they defended. So, planes came over, tried to carpet bomb the citizens or the factories or destroy the economy. They had a defense against it, and right now we don't. And the problem with that is to bring in a defense creates a lack of privacy, for lack of a better way to put it. But to try and put up those barriers, to try and put geopolitical barriers on the internet it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. There is a responsibility, I believe, by the government to provide some sort of protection. What that is, I'm not sure yet.
What about coming at this from the other direction? I think these days, particularly with ransomware attacks, sometimes you'll see organizations who've fallen victims of these things. They'll stand in front of the microphones and the cameras and they'll throw their arms up and they'll say, well, there's nothing we could do. This was a nation-state attack. And it's sort of, if nothing else, it's a rhetorical get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It is very much a tough one because a nation-state attack is not predicated on making money, right? Ransomware or typical ransomware where they're looking to get Bitcoin out of it and make some money out of it, that's an economic grab. And if you stop paying ransomware goes away because it's no longer profitable. So it is a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card because if someone points back and says, hey, nation-state attack, well, what can I do? I think eventually that's going to wear thin. I think we're going to have to start looking at ways to protect people. And that's ultimately, I think, what it is because they need the people. They need those user identities. They need the password credentials. They need the people to do things. So we're moving to a place where I've for a long time said there's no longer a work-life balance. There is simply a balanced life. Because of mobile phones, because of telecommuting, companies are going to have to start finding ways to extend the security that they have at the office to the person, not to the building, not to the physical location, but to the person always at all times, because even that person that works in the factory is going to have a mobile phone. They're going to walk into the factory with the mobile phone, and unless they're dumping them off at the door and Faraday caging the place, they're walking in there with an electronic device that is a potential attack point. So they're going to have to find ways to start extending it. And I think it will become a business or an enterprise piece, almost like a benefit, like kind of like insurance. We're giving you insurance to help you with your health. We're giving you dental insurance and vision insurance, and we're going to give you digital security. We're going to do something, and there'll be a form of doing that. We see that with companies like Zscaler that do the always on, take it with wherever you go. But I think it'll go beyond that. It'll get to a point where there's a balance, there's a different profile, because everybody has different identities. Everybody's got a work identity. They've got a personal identity, probably have 2 or 3 personal identities. I think we're going to start seeing these enterprises, in an effort to protect themselves, extend the protection to their individuals at all times.
That's Bill Harmer from SecureAuth. Criminals continue to use coronavirus stories as phishbait in attacks on businesses, the Wall Street Journal writes, citing research by Proofpoint. Sometimes the approach is straightforward phishing, as it is in cases of a bogus email purporting to originate with the World Health Organization. At other times, it can involve business email compromise, as in cases that show phony invoices for large purchases of face masks from medical supply companies. It's an international problem, first observed in Japan. According to Reuters, even Russian President Putin is taking note and blaming foreign rumor mongers and similar assorted no-goodniks. Russia's internet authority, Roskomnadzor, has been blocking bogus stories on VKontakte and Facebook. The Super Tuesday primaries in the U.S. went off without hacking or evidence of effective disinformation, and Bloomberg reports that NSA Director Nakasone told Congress yesterday that superior preparation on the defender's part made the difference. He compared this week's smooth defensive performance to what he saw in 2018. The 2018 midterm elections didn't go off badly, but in comparison to this week's operation, the 2018 security measures were, General Nakasone said, like a pickup game. Out in the Golden State, Los Angeles County did stumble badly with its new voting machines. Long delays induced by malfunctioning machines produced what the Los Angeles Times called, quote, an ugly debut for the county's new $300 million voting system, end quote. Voters are reported to have been standing around the polling places for 2 hours or more while poll workers tried to get the machines up and running, or else get a backup ballot into the voters' hands. Other election authorities who have adopted similar devices are reviewing their plans. The problems in and around the City of Angels were, it should be noted, the result of technical and organizational mishaps and mistakes, not the work of hackers or other meddlers. Executives from Nokia and Ericsson, the European hardware manufacturers the U.S. government has suggested would be attractive and more secure alternatives to China's Huawei, expressed their support this week for U.S. laws that would push the Chinese manufacturer out of 5G infrastructure, the Washington Post reports. Huawei executives also attended the hearings on their own, but weren't invited to testify. Huawei's preferred solution, they say, is transparency on everyone's part, and the company's executives believe that a fair reading of everything they've done for security would set everyone's mind at ease. And speaking of Huawei, Reuters reports that yesterday an attorney for the company entered a plea of not guilty to racketeering charges. At an arraignment in a U.S. District Court in Brooklyn, New York, the company also said they might have to ask for delays in the proceedings, as the coronavirus is making it difficult for their legal staff to travel. The racketeering charges are directly related to the company's alleged theft of intellectual property from U.S. firms.
And now a word from our sponsor, Observit, a Proofpoint company. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit enables security teams to detect risky user activity, investigate incidents in minutes, and effectively respond. With Observit, you'll know the whole story. Get your free trial at observit.com/cyberwire. That's observit.com/cyberwire. And we thank Observit for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Mike Benjamin. He's the head of Black Lotus Labs at CenturyLink. Mike, it's always great to have you back. You and your team have been doing some research on Nanocore, and you've got some stuff you want to share with us today. What do you have for us?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So Nanocore, as many people are aware, it's a somewhat commodity rat and has many of the remote access Trojan features you'd expect: keyloggers, password stealers, file exfil. Nothing really particularly unique in that space. Our feeling was recently that a lot of folks have dropped off their visibility into it because most desktop antivirus does a really good job of checking the binary install and stopping it. However, what we like to do is go hunt these things at a more internet-wide scale. And we found a pretty wide install base of people both trying to deliver and having it actively installed with callbacks across the internet. So what we went and did is ultimately try to validate where they're running, how they're running, and then look for the install base. Of course, we like to notify people of their infections. But really the message is that Nanocore as a rat is not something that we should be ignoring. There's always a host and an infrastructure that does not have that adequate update, does not have that adequate catch. An employee's figured out how to bypass antivirus, or somebody's home doesn't have it installed. And so things like Nanocore or other rats really are still a threat for stealing information from people on a day-to-day basis.
And is there any particular sector that they're focused on?
So it was interesting. The install base that we saw was heavy across broadband providers. Funny enough, the two biggest broadband providers were in the U.S. and Russia, but also, big populations of people in both those places. And so our belief was that they were targeting more people on the smaller end of the business spectrum, larger businesses doing a better job at protecting these things, as well as some home users looking to be more opportunistic around using passwords to banking sites and other things.
So what are your recommendations for folks to best protect themselves against Nanocore?
Realistically, best practices. Make sure that you've got some sort of endpoint agent blocking things from running that shouldn't be running, or even being on the file system that shouldn't be there. Nanocore, thankfully, is relatively easy to protect from that perspective, but also don't click links, don't download things. Nothing particularly sophisticated from a protection perspective. I will note one interesting thing that we found during the analysis: a really odd statistical concentration of command and control callback to Nigeria. And so ultimately looking at the geography of where you've got traffic going can really yield some interesting things in just about any environment.
Yeah, that is interesting. All right. Well, Mike Benjamin, thanks for joining us.
And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. And for professionals and cybersecurity leaders that want to stay abreast of this rapidly evolving field, sign up for CyberWire Pro. It will save you time and keep you informed. Look for us on your Alexa smart speaker too. Thanks to all of our supporters for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Observit, a Proofpoint company, and the leading insider threat management platform. Learn more at observit.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland, out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. Our amazing CyberWire team is Paru Prakash, Stefan Vaziri, Kelsey Bond, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Elliot Peltzman, filling in for our regular host, Dave Bittner. We'll be back tomorrow. As always, thanks for listening.